It's an exciting session for us as well because it's a peculiar endeavor, I would say, because we are not entirely sure what that's going to be like. We wanted to meet up here to basically discuss a thing that's been running through my mind for some time, which is how the world of game development and the like work in the trenches that we actually do on like a daily basis overlaps with marketing, and how can it overlap with marketing to one, support the communication and the promotion of our products out there prior and post release, but also how can it influence how we shape our games to be, and how we work on certain aspects of those games so that they are not only easier to market, but also that they are better games as such. And I know that, like, at least from my perspective, there are some angles that we can take that can be of value for us. This is why we are here representing like various perspectives and various angles, because some of us are from the like the game dev side of things, while the others are from the agency side of things with varied experiences from across the markets, basically. So today I wanted to basically tackle very simple stuff, because the simple stuff is the best stuff as I see it. We can always flex muscles and try to do some complicated things, but at the basis, at the very bottom of it all, it has to be built upon like a solid foundations. And so we're going to start with something that we usually start with when we think about our product, so the essence of the product. Something that when I've been working on various projects of ours, it's been a hell of a challenge, because on one hand, it seems very simple, what our game is about. But this is truly a difficult question to answer, because, again, my personal experience is that whenever we talk about our games, because games are complex, multi-layered products, we tend to give you like a robust descriptions, trying to touch upon all the features and trying to touch upon all the knobs and whistles that are there, while the simpler it is, the easier it is to focus on what matters, to prepare something that can actually exist on a competitive market. So we used to say in our company, which is 11-bit, that like everything starts with a game, meaning development, obviously, but marketing as well, business, promotion, you name it, events like leaflets, whatever that is, you have to look at it from the lens of the game. And so, because we've got some experiences in terms of working on various titles from various shelves and various categories, platforms, I wanted to discuss that from the perspective of how we've been working on the essence of those games and how that essence shaped up to be to actually serve as a valid foundation for the following marketing activities. So Alex, the question for you, because you have recently released Homeworld 3. Congratulations, man. Like the game looks absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
And so I wanted to ask, because for those of you who know Homeworld as an IP, you know that this is like a cult classic. That's one of the best sci-fi grand RTS strategy games. So releasing something that is a follow-up to at least 3 cult titles, one of which was like coming from your studio as well, right? Desert of Karak.
Yep.
How was it for you? And the question is like, what did you do and what have you focused on to maintain the essence and maintain those values that your already established fan base was familiar with and was craving for?
Right. So yeah, Homeworld, it's long-running series, one of the pioneers of like 3D strategy games, and to this day, it's pretty unique in the sense that you use the 3 axes of movement, right? X, Y, Z, and you can position your ships above to surprise the enemy, and so that is a very important pillar of the game. And when the team set out to make a new installment, the question was, well, what can we do that's new there, but also that's very much connected to this core way of playing the game. And so they actually went back to something they couldn't realize 20 years ago when they were trying to make Homeworld 2. At the time, Homeworld 1 was played in a kind of vacuum. Like you have your ships, space is a beautiful background, but it's kind of like a fishbowl, you know, and that's it. There's no, I mean, there were a few asteroids, but really it was an empty space. Homeworld 2 initially was meant to be very different, but because of technology at the time, they couldn't do it. So they went back to that idea, and what they did with Homeworld 3 was that to really make the most of the fact that you can really navigate the 3D space and position your unit in all kinds of different positions. Now we have giant megaliths, we have giant asteroids, and so you can, you know, navigate this space and surprise the enemy. For instance, there's an ice level. You can go underneath the ice sheet, and then the enemy, you'll be invisible to their sensors. So it's a new way to play, but that is very much connected to the core of Homeworld, which is making the most of the three axes. So that's one example.
Sure. Thank you so much. And like the previous game of yours was Shipbreaker, which even though it is not a shared universe with Homeworld, as far as I remember, it plays to some of the same themes and it tries to cater to a similar audience of sort, right? But at the same time, when it comes to the genre, when it comes to all the mechanics, it's a very different kind of animal because it's like a first-person survival crafting game, right? So, but at the same time, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that like trying to reach out with that game to your players, you were trying to also like pick that slice of a pie that actually was already invested in Homeworld. Like, what were the areas that you were trying to explore in terms of the communication? Was it like the visual side of things or some USPs that you were trying to sell to them?
Right. So the Hardspace Shipbreaker, it's the first new original IP from Blackbird. Like Homeworld was created decades ago when the creators of Blackbird were at Relic. Then the IP was acquired, and then we worked on it again, but we didn't own this. But obviously, the studio is very much identified with that. So when Shipbreaker came up, it was a little bit unstructured at first. It came out of a game jam, but very quickly, talking about this game and what kind of set the imagination of the team on fire, there are a few things that became a little bit more obvious in terms of connective tissue. So yeah, Homeworld is a strategy game, RTS. Shipbreaker is a first-person spaceship salvaging. But they're both about spaceship and vehicle fantasy. Like Homeworld is all about super detailed spaceship. If you play Deserts of Karak, well, it's more ground-based, but we have amazing mechanical animations for the buggy going over the sand dunes. To this day, we get people doing Twitter threads about, how crazy this level of animation is for an RTS. And Shipbreaker is the same thing. It's like you have amazing ships which have different system, fuel lines, reactor, differently pressurized area, but the way you interact with them is you go inside the guts of those ships and you recycle them. And so that's when, we're like, okay, that's pretty important, and that's an aspect that is key and that we want to leverage. The game didn't start there. The prototype for the game was more about free floating in space, and it was a bit more loose, but then all of a sudden when they found that connective tissue of the spaceships and recycling, they're like, oh, okay, there's something. And then the other aspect is that this game is, the pacing of it is, I would say, fairly slow, and the way you play it is you always have to kind of like think ahead, because the ships are intricate systems. So if you want to pull out the nuclear reactor, that's great, but there's no room to pull it out. So you're going to have to cut through the hull of the ship, but then this room is pressurized, and then maybe there's a fuel pipe that's running behind the wall. So you have to all of a sudden, think of like, okay, it's this 7-step process to get to where you want to go to. And a strategy game is the same. In the end, you want to beat your opponent, but then you have to gather the resources, you have to build the units, you have to build the right unit composition. So you're always thinking, 5-10 minutes ahead. And Shipbreaker very much has that. And then there was a little bit, I guess, of a funny, cheeky connection with our history, which is when Homeworld Deserts of Karak came to be. At first, Blackbird was working on a game called Hardware Shipbreakers. And so the title was abandoned because we got the Homeworld IP, we got the license to actually make it a fully fledged Homeworld game. But then when we came back to Hardspace Shipbreaker, at some point it became obvious that maybe we should reuse that term because there's a bit of a history there. And it's a way to tell people that, yeah, it's not a Homeworld game. It's a bit different, just like Hardware Shipbreakers was technically not a Homeworld game and then became one. But it lives in a similar kind of space. So it was really something more for the audience and the fans to pick up on.
Gotcha. That's like even more interesting to me because like funny thing from like behind the scenes in at 11-bit when we were starting our work on the marketing campaign for Frostpunk, we were very much inspired with the early trailers for Hardship Shipbreakers because you've had this like semi 2D animated trailers and we were like drawing from that, trying to establish something for Frostpunk. When working on like Shipbreaker or like Homeward, were you already when like the product was evolving and you were thinking about how to shape it up to be? Were you cooperating with any agencies, with any external vendors in terms of the creative side of things?
So yeah, there's two areas where like some external input. I mean, one is truly external, like an agency or a consultant, and one was, I'd say, an external team within the studio because we have a cinematics team that operates across our project, and they're fairly independent. So the first input I just alluded to it was the name Hardspace Shipbreaker came from Hardware Shipbreakers. And so the idea of like reusing that name but making it slightly different came from a consultant that we work with because he was like, well, yeah, you know, that was kind of like the original the prototype that you had done for the Homeworld Deserts of Karak that became something else, and it was about recycling spaceship. So, you know, people who know the history of this product will be like, oh, it's interesting that they call it the same way, but at the same time, it's still different. So it's kind of a way for us to say, okay, it's not in the Homeworld universe, but thematically, in terms of tones and all that, you're probably going to find some of the stuff you like with the cool spaceship design. And then the other part that came from the cinematics team is in Shipbreaker, if you play it, there's a kind of a funny totem, a thing that comes back pretty often. It's a stuffed bunny. It's a plushie. So that bunny initially was not meant to be that prominent in the game. What happened is, as the cinematics team was doing the opening cutscene for the game, they were going through the concept art folder, and they found an old concept art of a shipbreaker that had like a bunny attached to his suit, like a bunch of personal items. All this was inspired by research that our team had done around actual shipbreakers in India, and then the equipment they had, and they realized that they would customize this equipment and often have like lucky charms or things that reminded them of home and their family. So that's how I guess the bunny happened. And so the cinematics team thought that it was a cool detail, and then they snuck it into the opening cutscene where one of the first shots you see a little girl that watches her dad take off for space and to do salvage work in orbit, and she holds a bunny. And the dev team was a bit surprised by it, but they're like, oh, that's cool. And then the players started lashing onto it. And then this became this whole thing where people, when we were in early access, were asking about the bunny. The dev team ended up putting the bunny in the game as an item you can retrieve. And then the description has a thing, some crazy thing about how those products were designed. The bunny was a physical object that we made for the team when they shipped the game. Everyone got one of those bunnies. and then it was also in the final cutscene of the game. So it was interesting because it was fairly external to the development team. It came from another team. But then there was that creative conversation, and then there was a conversation with the audience also at some point.
So there is like a sort of a feedback loop. We're working on some ideas that are focused on the promotion. You can actually enrich the world or even some of the features of the game, right?
Exactly.
How was it for you, Rafał? Meaning like first working as a creative director for Cyberpunk, but right now you are kind of a fixer running Hungry Beast and working with other studios. Do you have any chances of actually like working on the product itself and co-shaping the product when working with certain clients?
Hello. Hi. I think that's the most interesting part of our work, that we are able to cooperate with dev team and create something really interesting and cool. We try to start very early with the creative pipeline, so we are able to talk with lore team, understand it more, try to find places and spaces that are interesting for us, that we can create something additional for the game that is not going to ruin the development process and is going to not change anything and destroy, but is going to add some additional flavor or some additional info about the game, about the lore. And most of the game worlds are so huge, so immensely thought through that there are so many cool points to find We have a lot of experience on this. I don't know, for example, we work on for a game called Paradise Lost, and we listened. We talked with the lore team, and we found out that before. I'm not going to say any spoilers. But the main thing is that the whole team is locked in a bunker. So there was no story before the bunker's lockdown. So we found some sweet spots where we can try to establish a connection. We thought that locking down of the bunkers was a very emotional and difficult moment, and a very important one for the whole stories. And we created a story around one of the bunkers that was being closed, and it was quite impactful, and it was fun, and it was something that was not meant to be and even mentioned in the game, and it ended up as an important part of the lore there. So.
Actually, I've got a follow-up question to that, because to establish that kind of an, let's call it an expanded universe for the game, through marketing, however you do that, whether that is some sort of a trailer or some sort of an additional asset from the smallest bits to something that is a bigger part of a campaign, you have to have like a very good understanding of what the game is. Where you come early into the project, and the project is like ever evolving because something's gonna change, something's gonna be cut, something's gonna be whatever modified because of the budgeting reasons or because of the creative change that happens somewhere along the way. You need a certain, again, understanding that comes from a set of information that you get from the client. So what is like the pivotal thing? What is like the backbone that you absolutely need to get from the developer to actually deliver the best work possible?
I was afraid of this question.
I know.
Well, but to be fair, the answer is quite simple. The game is always evolving. Like you cannot foresee how it's going to change. Basing on your experience, you could try to judge what are the elements that are, the most interesting for marketing, and you feel that are the strongest, and you hope they're not going to change. Because hope is all we got in marketing, to be fair. But yeah, you try to establish, talking with the dev team and with the lore team is extremely important for us. Understanding of the changes of the world, understanding the gameplay loop, how it supports it. We need to know it. We need to have all the data. So we try to start the process early. Of course, sometimes it's not that easy, but yeah, the core information is we need to get info on what is planned at this stage to be the USP, to be the most important parts of the lore. And we try, we are like detectives. We're trying to look for additional branches that are important enough, and have a potential of expansion. And this is something that gives us the most freedom, mostly, because we do not complicate the process, the dev team's process, but we can find the small bunnies that are cute and interesting and can bring in more emotion to the whole process, and it can bring more story. Like it automatically gives you some cool things that you can catch and bring additional emotional backpack there.
Thank you. Anna, Titus, thank you for being with us. I am very curious about your point of view and your perspective, because in comparison to what we do, you've got significantly more varied experiences because you work on multiple categories, multiple products, and on a significantly shorter deadlines, I would say. But at the same time, you are very much expected to know your product through and through, right?
Exactly, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about, if you don't mind that I go first. That you actually have to be able to familiarize yourself with the product that you're going to market. So, and you're not with the dev team all the time. You basically get the information when the product is either already finished or at the finishing stages. but you can't always play the game because it hasn't been released yet. So it can be problematic. But you still need to find ways to find these hidden gems, because I really like what both of you were talking about, because these are, like, most of the time, these are actually the things that make or break the marketing campaign. So it's very important to find these glimmers, how some people call them, yeah, and basically latch onto them and base the communication on that. But it's true that, you know, when you work in an agency, you think what you need to market, but then where you're going to market it, you need to be very specific about the target group, who you're going to talk to, because you don't only talk to gamers. You also want to talk to people who are interested, who could be potential gamers. So what would make them choose this game, even if they're not regular gamers? So is there something that would convince them? And sometimes it's actually the agency that is able to find this link, because there are so many different perspectives of people who are gamers. As myself, for example, I have to say Homeworld 2 was the game that opened my eyes to space exploration when I was a kid. Like, it changed my life. Just a, you know, tiny personal tidbit here, but it's, you know, you have to, like, gather all these people so that there are some who will give you the insight. This is important about this game. This is the thing that we want to emphasize. And then there's someone who will tell you, okay, so we need the strategy for that, and we need to base it on this and that target group. We need to go through these touch points, because this would be the best way to reach the group that we're trying to reach. And who are we even going to talk to? We can't talk to everyone, because gamers are not a monolith. Even if you talk to gamers, you can't talk to all of them in the same way. So it's always very important to make sure that you get this on point, and make sure that you know what you're going to say, to whom you're going to say it, and what you're going to base it on. I know it, you know, it does sound like basic stuff, but it really is important to establish this in as much details as possible, at least from my point of view.
Gotcha. Coming from, like, advertising industry into gaming, like, one of my surprises was that we don't have a lot of, like, that has changed along the years to some degree, but still I think that we could have potentially have more information about our audiences, target groups, some, like, in-depth insights about how they behave and how to cater to their needs. So this is something, if I understand you correctly, that actually we can benefit from working with an agency from early on?
Yes, I think that, you know, of course it's one of the things, but it's very important to establish who you're going to talk to. Because, like, a general message can reach the general public, but then you also want to reach some specific people, so you need to know how to do that. And I know that it depends, of course, on the data that you gather about your audience, and the data that the agencies have on different types of target groups that could be beneficial. But still, you know, at the very basis of communication is what you want to say, and these magic tidbits that you get out of the game.
So, like, trying to shape our new products and trying to shape our new games, we are doing our best to follow certain trends, to understand what sells right now, what can be fun, but actually what also can be profitable. So this is something that we can collaborate upon with an external vendor, whether that is like a media house or an agency or whatever, so that even before we get to the marketing, we can actually understand who's gonna potentially reach towards us, like, and grab our game from the shelf, right?
Yes, exactly.
Superb. And the other question, and that's gonna be a tricky one, I think, is that due to those deadlines and the fact that you've got significantly less time to get familiar with a product than we do, like being internally and going over and over certain features and whatnot, we do have some time to work something out. How does it work for you? Are there any advices? Are there any tools, like mind tools, but also technical tools, that we can use to be more efficient in terms of defining the idea behind the game or behind how we want to communicate that? Is there anything that we can treat as a first step, so to speak, in the creative process?
Do you want to answer this one?
Yeah,
or do you
sure.
want-
Why not? I I will try to. So I think that the main problem is that the games these days are really complex. They have like s- m- many levels, many elements that you can be involved to. Or some guys are just making develop their spaceships. They love to create. There are some discoverers that want to, always go far and far away. And there was even one example that for the one of the shooters that they couldn't find the one particular audience for the game. So they defined the three different audience in specifics of what the people are looking in that game. So there were adventures that they wanted to see the story, they're going through the storyline. There was so economic with guys who collect the money and upgrade the weapon and all that stuff. There was like more economic focus, and there was a gamers who wanted to just kill, crush, and destroy, and be the best shooter. So, and all of those audiences, they prepared 3 different trailers for them, because it's like a movie. You don't even you never know what scene gonna be the cult scene in a movie, and even at that bunny, yeah. You can build it, but still, it's always cool. But the thing is that it's not. It's a gimmick, and it's not selling the idea for the game. And that is one of the ways, because sometimes they are so complex, so there's so many paths to go through it that you cannot make one simple message. It's impossible. So I think that we if we're talking to each other, we need to find some elements, and then find a different target groups and try to focus on the groups. Not with the one communication. We can do it with the trailers or painting the whole world yellow, but still it's like more the branding than storytelling about the game. And to answer the question about the timelines and all that stuff, I'm really, even when I was preparing that presentation and trying to define those 3 paths, like branded games, this is the shortest path with the dead end in the end, because it's like a idea of making a campaigns in 2 months. So you need to develop the game in 2 months. So what you have like Pac-Man mechanics, Super Pong, and all that stuff from 80s. That's the only way that you can code in 2 months and branded it. The third path is a big collaboration, and this is what you're talking about, that the agency or the creators are involved from the beginning and trying to understand the game. But I really like that middle path, the hacking, but in a term of controlled hacking. So using and this is the fastest way, the most creative way, and the most open way, because we only using the word of the game and trying whatever it is, and try to make some use it as a medium, and try to tell the story inside the game using the native elements of the game, to tell the totally different stories, like this example for Red Dead Redemption 2. All you need to do is like collect the bread, tomatoes, beef, and cheese. And if you make a snapshot, you are going to the restaurant and buying and so you can tell every story in your own medium, in the language, in the visual, in the game. So I think that's pretty interesting, because you can always involve the agency, the creatives. Okay, this is the word, this is the elements. You have like a wood, a coal, and sulfur. This is the guys that are collecting it. Here you have sheeps, and then we're trying to get those elements, and because this is what we doing, we switching the clients almost every day. One day you're making a Coca-Cola, and next day Always, or OB, and then a toys, and then Canal Plus, or whatever. So if I saw the tools, the sandbox, we will try to build something inside. I think that is most interesting and not well-developed ways to
Yeah,
cooperate.
that's fascinating to me as well, because you've got this kind of a lateral approach, I would say, because of the fact that one day for you it's like Coca-Cola and another day it's Pol Pharma or whatever, right? So because we are constantly looking for some ways to support whatever we do, because as you have rightfully said, our products are complex and we have to tackle a lot at any given moment. So if I was to be your client, right, and I came to you with my game, for you to create that kind of a story that can support me along the way, whether that is with understanding and like enhancing what I already have there, or making it like lovable for people out there. What is like the essential set of information that you would need from me? What do I have to prepare so that I can expect you to do your best in terms of the creative support?
I think there are two elements. One is like what I can do in the game, what's my goals, and what's the world looks like, and what's the main goals. So because this is the closed world that I'm in. It's like a medium. If you are talking about this, totally the same thing in a radio commercial. So I know that I have only sound, I have 30 seconds, and that's all. That's the whole world. If I'm in television, I have 30 seconds or 50 seconds. I have a sound and vision, so that there are 4 elements. And now in the game, there are 200 elements. But if you try to do something complex in it, you will fail if you are not from the beginning. But still, if I look at it as a sandbox, just to build something and make the commercial inside the game to tell some story, this is the way. And I think that the best option would be like to play it for 15 minutes.
Gotcha.
And maybe
Yeah,
that's
but-
and then after all that's the answer when you can involve anyone on that creative path. Maybe sometimes there is no the point that it's too late. That's my approach after all.
The part about playing the game is interesting
It's
because
tricky,
that's the
I guess.
conversation we had with Rafa yesterday in regards to like some projects that we've been tackling recently, that we appreciate when people that work with us play our games beforehand because otherwise it's very difficult to understand. Whatever you read about the game, however you look at the materials until you play it, you won't know what's out there, right?
I think
Just to the end, the fourth. I think that is really, after all, it's pretty easy and not a time-consuming process because I have all the tools, all the elements in the game. So all I need is an idea because I won't do anything more than I have. You know, I have a piece of paper and 2 pencils, a red one and a green one. And if I make a bear, it's gonna be a bear. But still, I can tell the story. I can draw the comics, the tools that you give me. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So and it's not a time consuming to develop it because it's already developed. You can all you need to do is to tell that story.
Anna?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that because, of course, the perfect thing that you could give us if we were to work with your game is the game, actually. For us to play it, to be able to have time to familiarize ourselves with it, to find the details that Titus was talking about, to see the sandbox and see what we can use. I know that it's not always the case. It's not always possible to give the agency the full game because the game isn't finished yet, or it's impossible because of some legal reasons. There have been stories that we've been hearing. But ultimately, this is definitely the best way to go about it, to just let people play this game. But then again, there are a few important things that need to be established when we talk about how and what we want to promote. So I think that if it's impossible to play the game, let's say that it is impossible. We definitely need to know what, for example, what feeling you want the people to be left with when they play your game. Not only what the genre is, because this is one of the things, but then what is unique about this game. how is it different from other games from this genre? What is this game for you? So this is more like a, I would even say, philosophical discussion. But then again, when you craft creative communication for a game, you want to know what kind of feeling you want the people to be left with when they interact with your materials, not just with your game. So there's a lot to be discussed. But then again, yeah, the best thing would be to just give us the game ahead of the launch date so that we can enjoy it before others can, but
Sure.
if possible.
Yeah, like I think that like in most cases, especially when should we establish like a long-term cooperation, there is a way to play vertical slices, to play some early builds, right? Alex, like those agencies that were or cooperators of yours, let's say the person or the group that came up with the reuse of shipbreakers, were they invested in the development process from the early on? Were they familiar with like ins and outs of the game that you were creating?
Yeah, I mean, they roughly knew where this was going. It was a bit more of a like time-limited collaboration in this case. But there's another example from a previous company I work for that I want to bring up because I think it's pretty relevant. So a while ago, I worked for Bethesda on the marketing side when they opened European offices, and the Bethesda started working with agencies for branding and positioning and all that pretty early on. I mean, at least at the time they used to. It was almost a decade ago. So maybe things have changed. But and so for Wolfenstein: The New Order, there was something really cool that they came up with in their brainstorm, the U.S. headquarters and the agency. So Wolfenstein: The New Order, if you're not familiar with it, takes place in an alternate timeline where Nazi Germany has won the war, dominates the world, but then there's a group of people trying to topple the regime. And so in the game, you go in a bunch of different countries and areas, but obviously you can't go across the whole world. And so what they realized is that there was an opportunity to flesh out the world of Wolfenstein. The things that you don't necessarily see in the game, you could flesh it out in the marketing campaign. And so for us in France, that meant that we collaborated with an agency and we did fake TV newscast of what it would like if you had the Cannes Film Festival, except it's under Nazi Germany. So what are the kind of pop culture that regime would generate, and that became some marketing assets. And this was, I'm not going to put that just to the credit of the French team, because where it came from originally is, as they were having all those creative discussions with agency and the U.S. headquarters, they were thinking about okay, what kind of pop culture artifact would exist, and then maybe we can leverage that in our campaign. They came up with this amazing idea of creating bands, alternate 60s, 70s pop and rock bands, except they all sing in German. So imagine the Beach Boys that sing in German, and it's all about not being a rebel or something. You toe the line. So it's pretty ironic. It's pretty funny. So they created those bands, they recorded the whole songs. They created the visual identity of the bands, and then it was so good that they were like, why not use it in the game? So they ended up as collectible items. If you play Wolfenstein: The New Order, you will, in the levels, you will sometimes hear radio or an old vinyl record playing that music, and then you can collect it. But initially it was actually kind of born from a sort of marketing idea of you have this amazing world in the game, but you're only going to show a sliver of it, and then you're going to have to market this game to different markets, right? And so France might be more receptive to the idea of that game if you can kind of project them in what would it be like if you lived in France and it was, under Nazi domination, eh? So, that was a really interesting back and forth.
Yeah, but that's only possible when you think about the marketing side of things pretty early into the process, right? Because the game is still shaping up to be, and then you can grab those valuable ideas and incorporate them so they can support the pillars of your game. I do remember that in our case, with Frostpunk, we were working on the first or the second trailer. I think it was the second one, with people climbing the icy wall and trying not to fall. So basically that was the trailer that was about to establish the premise of the survival game about the community and the group, not necessarily a one entity. And I do remember that like the biggest challenge, like the production challenge actually that we had, was to make those people climbing visible because of the like snowstorm effects. And we came up with this, okay, let's give them lamps because we need to have some lights that are visible on the wall. And those lamps like became a part of the world that actually got incorporated into the game itself, and finally, ultimately became one of the pivotal like visual elements along with the huge generator in the middle of the city that defined the world of Frostpunk. But they initially became an idea that we came up with for the sake of the trailer solely, right? So those things, this is why the value is probably in cooperating closely, whether that is like the internal marketing team or the external one, because the external one gives you an additional value of a broader perspective. And those like talking earlier over the coffee, you said like the very interesting thing that you need to have like a perspective of someone who doesn't have the tunnel vision, right? Someone who comes from the outside and can give you a fresh look at what you are doing. And I've got that very much right now, that working on one project like for the last few years, I don't know what's good and what's not. I need someone to actually evaluate and reevaluate that from time to time. But like Titus mentioned, like painting the world yellow. And I do remember that you have painted the world in few colors. And I wanted to ask, actually, not about the yellow color of Cyberpunk, but the color of Ghost Runner, because I liked this way the marketing side of things actually established the theme and the tone of the world for me as a player way before I have actually played the game itself. And I wanted to ask, like, how much of that happened on the dev side and how much of that happened during the cooperation of your creative team with the development team, and maybe some of those things ended up in the game itself?
Okay, that's a humble thing would be to say, no, we didn't do anything. But frankly speaking, it was mostly about the cooperation. We love the cooperation around Ghost Runner. It was a very open brainstorming sessions and talking about the world, understanding it more. And there were a lot of really creative ideas. And what was cool is that we were giving a lot of freedom. For example, what was interesting for us is that at the beginning we established that we wanted the main hero to be a bit more human. That's why we added the jacket at the first key art. Like, if you play the game, there is no jacket inside of the game. But we thought, well, but you know, the hero is an outlaw. He's looking for his identity. He has to have his gadgets. He has to have something that makes him more like relatable. Something that makes him feel and makes us feel because of it. So the dev team, instantly loved the idea. We created it. We made the poses more human. We made the attitude more human, and instantly it became very interesting, and it had an impact on the whole game. And as you know, in the second installment, Ghost Runner has a cape and has a suit because it worked.
Guys, we need to wrap it up, even though I've got a bunch of questions to ask you. But if there are any questions from the audience, we are possibly happy to answer them. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you one quick thing, because I am very curious if you've got any recommendations, because like, as we know, good artists copy and great artists steal. So is there anything to steal out there right now? Do you have any immediate thoughts on resources, things to follow, things to observe, to get inspired, to be on top of what is happening right now, especially outside of the gaming like environment, something that we can be aware of to draw from to support our marketing campaigns and marketing endeavors. Anna, anything that comes into your mind?
I will actually be talking about this during my presentation, so I can give you a short summary.
Okay,
but
please do.
basically, and you don't even have to look too far because you can say many things about Ubisoft. You can love them, you can hate them, but the way they do their marketing with agencies is incredible. And you can also look at local insights because quite a lot of things that happen on local markets are quite incredible. I would especially look at the Romanian market and how they promote the big titles on using very, very local insights. It's actually something that is, I think, important to follow. But I think that in general, just looking at not just the trailers, not just the assets that are being put out, but basically everything creative that's happening around the game and with the community, because this is also an important thing, just keep tabs on the community. This will give you an idea of where everything is going and what people actually notice and what they partake in, because this is also important.
Cool. I'm happy to hear the whole talk.
Hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Titus, anything to add?
Yeah, I totally agree with Dania. There was a if you remember the movie Bowling Columbia about the massacre in a high school in U.S. There was a Marilyn Manson in that movie, and they asked him what would he say to these young people not to do that again, and he was like, to say to them, just listen. I would listen to them. So I think that the community is the place that you can find the insights, listen to them, give what they want. They are more in the game than you, after all, I think, and have this overlook, the helicopter view on and they knew what they are the heavy users, so they knew what they miss in the game, and you can build the whole story. There was a nice example in the city project presentation about the walking button. There was another patch, and there was the walking button, and then suddenly there was a big patch with almost changing the whole game, putting it on the other level, and the walking button, and the whole news, the whole PR was around that. So I think that we need to, and this is a nice quote for a nice sentence for the end of then that we all need to listen to each other, and I think that there's lots of really cool things to invent together.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for spending this hour with us. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Should you want to talk to us, we're going to be outside. Thank you so much, guys. Have a
Thanks, everyone.
great day.